Hello, you lovely people, and welcome back to Sabbatical Stories. I'm your host, Bex Thomas, and today I'm coming to you from Ha Giang in Vietnam, the gateway to one of the world's most scenic motorbiking routes, which we are just about to embark on for the weekend, so I'm super excited. I created this podcast to inspire courage and normalise taking a break from your career. If you find these stories valuable, I'd love it if you could help by subscribing, liking, and rating the show. It really does mean a lot. Today's episode is a special one. If you've ever wondered what's possible on a sabbatical beyond just travel or taking a break, this conversation is for you. I'm joined by Kat, a former C-suite executive turned initiated shaman. Kat is the founder of Wild Tribes and Transforming Tribes, where she helps individuals and corporations reconnect with nature, embrace rites of passage, and shift their perspectives on leadership, growth, and impact. It's an episode all about stepping outside the familiar and embracing real change. I know you're going to love it, so let's dive in. Deep down, you've tried, dig deep, search wide, enjoy your climb, it's all for you. Hey Kat, it's so wonderful to have you with us on Sabbatical Stories today.
Thank you so much, Bex, for having me here. It's really a great privilege.
Oh, my pleasure. And it's a bit different today because we'll be focusing on some of the work that you do, which listeners could perhaps incorporate into their sabbaticals or career breaks. So yes, we'll lace your story through that, of course, and that will come out naturally. But really, this is an episode that I hope will, encourage listeners to expand their ideas of what might be possible just beyond travel or rest. But before we jump in, can you give us a brief intro to Kat and the type of work that you do, please?
Absolutely, I can. I guess you could say that the background has been about 30 years of founding, scaling, globalizing companies, a lot in the tech space, but also in the consumer product space as well. And that's given me a really strong foundation to understand principles of business and of leadership, and also of the different mindsets that going into different cultures through the different countries that my businesses were based in really required of me. It wasn't really a choice. And so in that context, I've then moved into more of a portfolio career the last 10 years, where I'm advising on boards. I sit on the board of an ag tech scale-up farm bot that's known in Australia, ranch bot in the US, as well as work with some people around investment portfolios that are heavily focused on sustainability and on regenerative technologies. I wrote a book that came out a couple of years ago called Digitalizing Sustainability, the 5 Forces of Digital Transformation. And that at its core really explored the concept of how do we embed the best of human characteristics into our emergent technology for regenerative and sustainable outcomes. And it was actually in writing that book, and the researching of it was about 5 years before the writing of it happened, that I also in my personal life was deep diving massively into Indigenous bushcraft and survival techniques, into Indigenous wisdom and awareness, shamanic practices from South America, North America, and Australia, and became an initiated shaman in the Queros Andean Incan lineage, became an initiated shaman and vision quest guide in the Lipan Apache Stalking Wolf lineage, and started working very closely with Indigenous medicine people here in Australia. And the reason for that and how that's all transpired into my current, day-to-day life is really that I found that it's through systems change that we can create the biggest impact. And all systems have different components, of which we as a single unit are one of those. And so I started to recognize this very strong correlation between what we do as one is how we do for all, and that the principles of eldership needed to be really given the appropriate amount of attention and light when it comes to looking at leadership principles. They really are focused too heavily, in my opinion, on egocentric systems as opposed to ecosystems. We're focused very much on extraction versus stewardship, and we're focused very much on competition versus collaboration and co-creation. And so it was really this basis that I'm now launched about 3 years ago, Transforming Tribes for the corporate space and Wild Tribes for the personal space, this concept of meshing ancient wisdom with modern science and emergent technologies, amplifying it by human and nature connection, so that we can actually start drawing all of the parallels from bush to boardroom instead of paddock to plate. And really start to infuse the remembering and the wisdoms that have guided the evolution of humanity on our planet for so many years, since time immemorial, so that we're not losing the things that which should never be forgotten. So that's me in a nutshell.
What an introduction. Wow. So in terms of our audience, can you give us a insight into the type of work that you do within each of those businesses and how that would sort of play into somebody's sabbatical or career break?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess it could be answered the same for both, because it's really isn't too different. Wild Tribes really focuses on the individual, however, whereas Transforming Tribes focuses on our modern day teams, in my eyes, our modern day tribes, and as well the leadership teams that drive and support the visioning for those tribes. But at the core essence, there's really, in my mind's eye, 4 pillars, what I call the nature of transformation. These 4 core pillars that sit at the core of anything and everything as humans we do, which puts us into the flux of change, or as I'd like to say, keeps us on that edge of chaos, which is where transformation happens, right? And in my mind's eye, those 4 things are perspective shift, lived experience, the awareness of self, and the awareness of our environment. And the way that our programs work is as if they are an ecosystem for people to be able to connect in whatever layer they're at in their life and in their journey, with their own understanding of self-mastery and self-awareness tools, with their own desire to connect with aspects of deepening their purpose, their passion, and gaining clarity about the direction of their life, and also with their own desire to understand how that impacts or can plug into greater ecosystems of people to create and catalyze collective action and change. The philosophy behind those 4 pillars comes down to my own personal belief that there is a cataclysmic level of paradigm shifts that we need to have as a human race in order to move into a regenerative, sustainable civilization, and that we can't have those unless we have radically different lived experiences. And it is through having those radically different lived experiences, which for most of us in the modern world would need to be, if they're going to be radically different, based on Indigenous wisdoms and frameworks around working with that which we've become more disconnected to, i.e. our more than human realms, our natural world. And it's only through that we can shift belief systems that were stuck or no longer serving us and bring us into different relationships with how we view ourselves and also our relationship with our environment around us. And so once we have that perspective shift, we tend to be a lot more open and a lot more curious. We tend to have a sense of awe and wonder around us and about us that makes us want to seek out to actually explore the landscape of our own internal being and discover new things and discover different relationships that we can have with aspects of ourselves that we maybe thought beforehand were completely, concrete pillars that weren't going anywhere. And when we start seeing our own internal landscape as that flexible, agile state, we then can actually see how everything around us is only a reflection of how tightly held we had all of those threads and how the rest of the world was able to relate to us based on that.
And on your website, and I know through, us chatting, you talk about rites of passage, vision quests, retreats. Can you give our audience a bit of an understanding of what the difference is between those three, I don't know whether you'd call them programs or experiences, and how somebody would maybe know what's best for them on a sabbatical?
I would say nature immersions and or programs perspective. There is always an element with our programs of giving people an opportunity to connect with the natural world in ways that goes beyond a nice gentle walk in the bush. If anyone has ever heard an Indigenous person speak about their relationship with country, you would probably get more of an idea of what our programs facilitate for people. Something quite profound happens when we start living in a way with country where we start to perceive it as being so important to us that it's like an extension of our own body or like our own relative. It is in moments where we have to put ourselves in a relationship with nature where it's a requirement of our completion of an experience, requires us to be held by nature, requires of us to actually enter into a trust relationship, that we actually shift and change the way that we see our relationship with not only ourselves, but then it starts to extrapolate out into how we view our connection to these things. They become not just something nice to sit in or look at, but something that is so deeply necessary to us. With that, it's quite interesting. There's a lot of studies, most of the major universities around the world. I won't bore you going into each one individual, but a collective outcome of a lot of studies around rites of passage, for example. Rites of passage, it's very interesting to me that there are receptors in our DNA as humans that require us to go through processes where they are led by a relationship with the sacred, a relationship with the natural world, in a way where from one moment of where we are today, we're able to step with a clean break from this moment into the next phase of our life, leaving behind what was heavy to us and what was out of harmony with us before that moment. And so every rite of passage is a ceremony and a stepping into, you could say, a sacred portal of beyond time and space to create a clean break and transition from one way of being into another. But not every ceremony is a rite of passage, if that makes sense. And so a lot of our programs, like the Vision Quest, is very much focused on allowing people to have that opportunity to step into something in a way where they're fully witnessed in that. And that is the other aspect that really is quite integral to us in our ability to feel belonging and to feel connected and to feel like we have a place in this world and to feel that our value and our worth has been recognized in meaningful ways for what we bring just because we are, not because of the thing we can do or we're most talented at or what we look like or what roles we play, but just simply because we exist. And it is in those places where we create containers for people to have these transformational experiences where they receive that level of being seen, heard and witnessed. And that is how we start to teach people about what it means to be in tribe. And I guess that the essence of all the programs is that we understand that as a human, we're only ever going to be capable of being in healthy families, healthy communities, healthy tribes, healthy nations, to the extent that we are capable of being healthy within ourselves. And so even our programs that are more nature-based or more leadership-based around eldership and stewardship principles, around wisdom making, sense making, they all have these elements of also allowing an individual to peel back layers that aren't actually working for them anymore. And I guess that feeds into the second part of your question around people looking to go on sabbaticals and how this plays into that. Because there's been plenty of leaders that have come through these programs with us who have chosen to take a break or are using it as a mini break or using it as these programs as a way to begin or end, to sandwich that sabbatical journey. None of them ever, in my experience, are coming from a place where they think everything is going absolutely perfectly in their life. They have arrived.
Is there such a thing?
There is no such thing. Well, actually, I would say that there is always perfect. It's just that
our own interpretation of perfect
changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. There's probably a better way to phrase that, even of they have felt a stirring in their being. They can't put a finger on it.
Yeah.
They don't know where it's come from, why it's there, and why it continues to eat away at them like this little voice that was a whisper is now a roar, to the point that they can't ignore it anymore, and they've just got to go and do something about it. Interestingly, it happens quite often at the same time that we feel that stirring, around the same phase that we're moving from our adolescence into our adult years. Now, that doesn't necessarily relate back to our years of chronologically. It relates to when we've decided that we would like to begin adulting in our life.
I'm not there yet.
So there's quite a broad range of chronologically aged people that would say after one of these experiences, they feel like they've finally been able to move into a place where they can adult themselves.
Yeah, wow.
Where they can take responsibility and accountability for all of their actions, and where they can perceive everything that has happened in their life to this point as pure medicine and the lessons that are going to guide and shape their direction, as opposed to things that for a lot of people may have had a lot of guilt or shame or regret attached, or maybe simply, I hate the word failure, but they've really identified with lessons equaling failure. And so it allows them to come into that perspective shift. This calling or this rising up is ordinarily because they are feeling they're at a crossroads of a threshold. The other time it happens ordinarily that I see a lot of is when we move into our sage and crone years. So when we've hit the 40, 45-year-old mark. And this is very interesting because these are two natural threshold crossing moments in our human DNA, where our DNA is screaming, I must have that change. And so we think it's because we need a break from our career. But on an energetic level, our body is saying, I've got to have the clean break so I can move into the next layer of my wisdom.
Yeah, wow. And is that both female and male?
Yes. So we would call that moving into the crone for a woman and moving into the sage for a man. And we need to have these transition periods. And what particularly in the latter phase, what we find is that it is a calling of our being wanting to put in order everything so we can let go of all the heaviness, all the hurt, all the things that have caused a deeper layer of wounding in our being. What we find is if we don't let go of those things before we move into our later years, they almost become like an energetic concrete that then starts producing disease, chronic illness, mental health issues, relationship issues. And we find that it's at these transition points when people are looking to go on a sabbatical that they're actually ready to face this stuff.
And it's interesting because the individuals that I work with are obviously at a crossroads, but there's so many who go through a sabbatical or a career break and they don't truly solve for the why.
No.
And I think that's that whole piece of putting a band-aid over it. That's the difference between maybe an elongated vacation where you're not quite sure why you're feeling like this or why you feel like you need a career change or a career break or time off, but you just therefore take a longer vacation and then come back and guess what? Same shit, different day. You know, it feels like nothing's changed. You've just had a longer holiday. But actually, it sounds as though doing the work with you and on these programs, it's really then unpeeling those layers and getting to the root cause, really.
Absolutely. You couldn't have said it better. The word that was coming up as you were talking was it's about the root cause. It's about meeting the things within inside ourselves that have been ignored for so long that they have taken up residence in a way in our being, whether that's in our emotions, our mental capacity, our ability to feel purpose and passion in life. It literally starts to permeate every aspect of our lives if we leave even the smallest thing unturned as we go into these next phases. And so it really provides people that opportunity in very safe places. I like to say to gently meet the edges that are there for them to meet. We're not forcing people to move into deeper spaces anywhere where it's beyond where they naturally would want to go, but it does provide the ability through that lived experience to turn knowledge into wisdom.
As we're all about stories on Sabbatical Stories, can you share a moment of your own journey where, I suppose, stepping away from work or a nature experience has led to a profound insight?
Oh gosh, I could share so many. The path of shamanic initiation is not gentle. But I think my very first sabbatical that had me hooked on this path was the very beginning of COVID. I actually started my journey of initiating as a vision quest guide and protector. And first off, that means deep lived experience of the process of vision quest, so multiple times questing over a period of time. But I would say that the experience with vision quest is as much that it evolves and turns into a completely different and new experience every time you do it. I've had a very big history of trauma in my life, and I had learned how to become very addicted to victimhood. And whilst I was very successful in my corporate world, I would call them the balconies of my life. I'd started to have that itchiness in my being around, it was about 30, I'm almost 45 now, I was about 37, 38 years of age, and recognized that I was having a lot of basements in my personal life that were almost parallel, and that it had to stop. And I had a forced sabbatical because I was laid off during COVID and I was given a nice garden leave bonus.
Always helpful.
Always helpful. And I guess what I decided to do at that moment, I had a bit of an epiphany one night, because I was like, I can't believe here I am at this age, like getting laid off. Like, don't they see my value, my worth, da da da. And I had this moment where I realized, actually, I don't see my value and my worth. And that's why I'm attracting circumstances into my life. I'm choosing these circumstances based on how I choose to relate to myself. And even though I'd done decades of work on this particular topic, I had always done it from a place of what I recognize now were not from a place of addressing the root cause. And so I'd recognized that every time my house of cards of life had fallen down personally, I'd rebuilt another one based on this foundation that actually was full of trauma and victimhood and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so I made the decision that I'd spend as much time as it took to excavate out the foundation, to dig right underneath it and actually just see where Catherine is. Where is she if she isn't trauma? Where is she if she isn't hyper competitive in the corporate world? Where is she if she isn't this, isn't a fitness fanatic, isn't a da-da-da? And I took all the identities off and decided to dive into these different practices to meet who she is as a human. And so, it was a very, very big journey for me, I would say they're all big and huge. I don't actually think I will ever stop evolving as a human being. I'm addicted to the concept of meeting new parts of myself and helping other people explore that within themselves. That feels like a really healthy thing to enjoy. But that first vision quest was about meeting my power. 4 days, 4 nights in the bush, in my own, what we call a vision quest circle, about a 3-meter diameter of bushland that I've chosen. There were another 20 people out there doing this at the same time, but we were all probably 500 meters apart from each other. And it took a solid 20, 30 odd minutes to walk out to where we were from the base camp. So you really are walking away from everything familiar, including food for 4 days and 4 nights. You have water with you for that time. But I was put in a place where I could no longer ignore myself and my stuff, given the opportunity to sit with country in a way where Mother Nature had to be the only thing I could depend on, and I relied on Mother Nature not to send me poisonous snakes and not to send, this or that and all the stuff that goes on in your head before you go out to these things, and really, really just fell into a place of deep trust and surrender with the process. And in that process discovered that I am infinitesimally powerful and have every ability to be anything and do anything that I ever want to, and that I have an extraordinary capacity for having my own back. And it's only from that place of power that I learned in that moment that we can't be pointing fingers anywhere and simultaneously be in our power at the same time. We're either in it or we're not. And so it's completely shifted my own internal dialogue with myself, with the world around me, with the way that I conduct myself on a daily basis. Every decision I make is my choice. And I found myself just making very conscious different decisions based on what my being needed. And it has completely shaped the rest of my life. And I feel that when we do a sabbatical in a way where we actually listen to that quiet voice within, when we give ourselves the opportunity to sit in stillness and to let the noise, and my God, is it deafening, the noise of all the familiar. When we actually give ourselves that permission, it's not frightening like we think it's going to be. It's actually the most profound and beautiful meeting of ourselves that we could ever hope for. And yeah, that's shaped the entire trajectory of the last decade of my life and brought me to places of being able to support extremely deep work for people one-on-one and in groups. I couldn't be feeling more blessed and more alive than I do in this moment.
What a beautiful story, and thank you so much for sharing. I have a question. Did you sleep?
Well, my subsequent vision quest, there's been a little sleeping, but there is also this saying with questing: if you're resting, you're not questing.
Oh my goodness. For somebody who literally, I think about going to bed from the moment I get up. I'm a really early morning person, but I visualize my snuggling down and my nighttime tea and everything. And the thought of the food, I'm a foodie as well, but the thought of no food, I can deal with. The thought of no sleep. Oh my goodness.
Look, you would find that if sleep meets you, it's meant to be.
Yeah, I get that.
And if it doesn't, it's not. And there's definitely, you've definitely got all the equipment and all the preparation. You're not just thrown out there. Like, there's a very strong preparation process and integration process around this that people absolutely feel 100% prepared for a vision quest before they go out there. And also on the return, what I call the coming down from the mountain, the coming down from that heightened spiritual experience, it can be very alienating and almost more traumatic if it's not met with the deepest care and wisdom on how to integrate. And so we're very, very conscious of that and put a lot of effort into making sure that, we're really supportive of people turning that experience into positive life affirming outcomes in their lifetime from then on. But yes, definitely sleep is allowed. It's just sometimes we run our vision quest out in the Warrumbungles. It's in the only Sky National Park in the Southern Hemisphere. So that means that it's complete light pollution free. It is the most extraordinary. I live for the nighttime of a quest now.
Yeah, wow.
Because the nighttime is so magic and allows for so much perspective change and introspection.
What do you take with you into the circle? Like water, what else?
Yeah, you've got 10 litres of water with you. You've also got a small first aid kit in case you get a tick bite or something like that. So you've got what you need there. There's also a mechanism for people to be able to communicate with us without seeing us. I won't go into that, but we would check people's communication mechanism twice a day every time they're out there, so we know that everyone is well and safe and everything is good. It also gives that mechanism of being able to meet a need if there was one, like someone needs an extra blanket or something like that, without them having to actually come in contact with us. But the actual physical stuff, you would take a rucksack probably full of a few layers of clothing. You would take a toilet roll with a Ziploc bag. You dig a latrine, not in downwind from your Vision Quest site, and not so far away either, but it's definitely not in your Vision Quest site. And you take a rope and a tarp, a sleeping pad. Some people take a pillow, a sleeping bag, Some people might take a mosquito net, although in the Warrumbungals, mosquitoes are not really a thing. And the rope and tarp is so we train you how to set up a mini shelter in case it does rain. But it's pretty basic, and it is designed so that nothing in the circle with you is something familiar to you, including routines. So if people are yogis and they do yoga every day in their everyday life, we encourage them to let go of the routine of that and see what happens.
Well, it's the addiction again, isn't it? The addiction to, you talked about addiction to victimhood, the addiction to routine. I think there's something to be said for that, right?
Totally. I often talk about the fact that addiction is just such an insidious little thing, because addiction really, at the core of it, is anything that we think we are so attached to that we cannot have choice over how much we do it, or that we cannot live without. That's actually something we're giving our power to, and it's stopping us from being able to make conscious decisions for our life, because we've actually given a channel of our life to something that's doing the deciding for us. And that's not a place that we actually thrive in, and it's not a place where we are able to have healthy communication with ourselves and other people in. And so we tend to find that it starts to cause very funky ripples and crunchy moments in our life, no matter what it is. It could be a really positive thing. And it could also be the identity, the addiction of an identity, being out there in a Vision Quest circle with no one seeing you as the successful CEO, or seeing you as the caring mother, or no one to have to think about except yourself. It also allows for a shedding of ego and identity in a way that, without that, we can't hold the different perspectives, and we can sum up our ability or capacity to hold wisdom in one thing. How many perspectives, completely different perspectives, can you hold all at the one time without needing to attach to any of them? And that's what Vision Quest really allows people to do, is to drill into those kinds of things. But it is a different experience for everyone that goes out there. So you'll just have to experience
it myself. I could sit and talk to you about it forever. What's your advice to anyone contemplating, this kind of activity whilst on their sabbatical, but feeling a bit uncertain?
Look, my first bit of advice would be to hop on a call. The first thing is to not allow the monkey mind to catastrophize. The way we calm the monkey mind is to equip it with actual information and not made up what if scenarios. And then from there, I often find myself saying to people, when they explain where they're at and why they're feeling the call to do something like this, they'll also try and also in the same breath explain or justify why everything's okay. And I said, well, that's wonderful. That's really great that you're feeling good about that. But is it whatever the subject is that they've brought up? I not often ask them, but how's that working out for you? Like, it sounds like you're needing to take a break from what you're doing because it's actually not working out, right? And really, at the end of the day, it's the honesty of, I need to do something completely foreign to what I've done before in order to have a different way of thinking and being come into my life. And if someone is looking for that, going on a holiday can give them some respite from the everyday, but it's not going to shift how they see the everyday when they invariably have to come back to it. So I guess one sentence to sum it up would just be to feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah, I love it.
Feel the feels and just jump in, and you won't regret it.
And it comes back to, what's the saying of, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And it is, I think so many people are on that, kind of just band-aid or shoving it under the carpet rather than actually meeting it head on and taking the consequences of what that actually means.
And when you add layers to it of things like our DNA needs these experiences for it to activate certain things in our receptors, like that's extraordinary. Could you actually forgive yourself if you didn't go through, you don't know what you're actually hiding from your own self, and what activating these components in your being could actually open up for you, because the spaces that we actually are then able to create from and learn from, and the way in which we can respond instead of react, they are fundamentally changed when we allow ourselves to have those types of experiences.
Thank you so much, Kat. It's been amazing to chat to you and learn more about the work that you do. How can listeners who are ready to start to explore or, embark on such a journey get started and get in touch with you?
Thank you so much as well, Bex. I've really, really loved this opportunity, and it just fires me up talking about this stuff, as you can tell. So I certainly feel like I've talked your ear off, but hopefully in a good way.
Absolutely. And I certainly feel like you found Kat.
But how to find me? Look, the easiest thing would be to either go to transformingtribes.com or wildtribes.com.au, or to Google my name, because everything that you could find online with my name attached to it would lead you to one of those two places.
Great. And we will put all of those links in the show notes as well. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing parts of your story and also the work that you do. It's amazing and beautiful. And I hope, the audience do take some insight into what else they could be doing. One of the reasons I set up the podcast was to myth bust. And I think one of the myths is that sabbatical career break is either parental or travel related or sort of, educational, like an MBA has been always that sort of considered option. But that there are so many different options out there. And I think this one is so impactful. So thank you for coming on and sharing. And a heart full of soul, it's connected. And I'm moving along, I won't let it all. Thanks so much for listening. I truly appreciate each and every one of you taking the time to be here. And of course, a massive thank you to Kat for sharing her incredible journey and insights into how we can integrate ancient wisdom into modern life. If today's episode resonated and you'd like to learn more about Kat's work, you can connect with her through Wild Tribes and Transforming Tribes. I'll link everything in the show notes so you can explore more. A special thank you, as always, to Auntie Bea at the Flaxen, my amazing, patient and talented producer. And a big shout out to the awesome Joanna Cook, whose soulful vocals we're lucky enough to feature throughout the show. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could like and rate the show. And if you really want to make my day, leave me a positive comment too, please. If you know someone who would love this conversation, send it their way. Your support means the world, and helping getting these stories out to more people who need to hear them is amazing. Do you have a sabbatical story to share, or maybe you know someone whose journey would inspire others? We'd love to know. You can get in touch via Sabbatical Stories Podcast on Instagram or message me on LinkedIn. I'm Bex Thomas. Until next time, take care of yourself, keep dreaming big, and remember, your sabbatical story is waiting to be written.